You know that your team sucks and mine is great. It's time for AFFL. Hey, gonna make them pits, gonna make them mad. I'm gonna do them dirty. AFFL Week 6 review. The picks are 4-2 on the week, 18-19 on the season, getting better. ISIS with the big win, 3-3, getting better. My mood, getting so much better, thank you. And maybe because my favorite prediction from Friday actually came true, the big chubby scumbag who set up Todd Gurley was a Gators fan. The South, man. Just stay away. Anyway, big ISIS win this week. All thanks to the big hero last night, Colin Kaepernick. 343 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 37 rushing yards for 27 big points, and the comeback win when he threw that last pass to Crabtree on that beautiful double move route. I got so excited. I felt like I was going to Kaepernick. Joik Bell, 15 points, and Lamar Miller, 14 points. Let me tell you something. I was watching intently in the first half as Bell and Miller were doing nothing at all, and finally they got it going in the second half. Bell into the end zone, Miller into the end zone. Dolphins were struggling till they finally turned the ball over to Miller in the late third and early fourth quarter. Then they had 2 great drives where he just took them down the field. And then the breaking news this morning, no Sean Moreno, torn ACL, out for the rest of the season. Lamar Miller is the man in Miami. All those times over the past 4 weeks where I told you guys to trade for Lamar Miller because I had enough depth where I didn't really need him, and he had a cupcake schedule coming up, and Moreno is often hurt, even when he comes back. You had your chance, and the price has gone up, up, up. Alshon Jeffrey, 13.6 points, only on yards. No touchdown, and Randall Cobb back into the end zone. What else is new? 11.9 points there. Bengals defense, a -1. That Bengals defense looked so great in the first 3 weeks of the season. Now has a total of -6 points since I picked them up, and I am not loving that. I am loving that I pulled this one out. It was a squeaker because let me tell you, if I dropped to 2-4 because Alshon Jeffrey was tackled on the 5 and Adam Jones had a late kick return in which he was tripped up on the 4 by a white guy, and I would have lost, I would have been pretty upset. I also would have been pretty upset knowing I lost because Tom Brady, with his 28 points, threw the ball up into triple coverage to Brian Tims and ended up getting the touchdown there. Le'Veon Bell, only 10 points. Pretty stinky game for the Steelers. I think many of you probably saw it, and you definitely saw Ben Tate diving into the end zone twice. 19.8 points. I was extremely worried about that. To give you an idea of how I was feeling, I didn't really care for the Steelers because I had already given up on them, but I still had hopes for myself, selfishly. Jerick McKinnon, 8 points. He got a lot of touches. He might be the man going forward, but Roddy and Macklin, only 5.6 combined, while on the bench, Andre Johnson, 14.9 points. Can't really fault Animal House for the decision, starting White or Macklin over Johnson. Probably the right move. Just didn't work out. Both of these teams are now 3-3, and ISIS, currently the number 5 seed and in the playoffs. And let me tell you, folks, I pulled out 94 points and a clutch win with Eddie Lacy putting up 4 points and A.J. Green and Calvin Johnson out. Let's take your top 2 receivers out of the lineup. Let's see if you put up 94 points. This ISIS team rounding into a scary, scary shape. Speaking of scary, Luthbrock, 112. Timmy doesn't have any friends. 59.1. Little bit of good news for Scott in this one. He didn't have to worry about leaving Torrey Smith's 17 points on the bench. It mattered none. So when Torrey Smith had those 2 first-quarter touchdowns, Scott knew that it wasn't going to matter in the end. Gary, I'm not going to go so far as to say he knows what he's doing, but I think I'm going to have to pump the brakes on him. Well, let's see. We know he's not good because he drafted Bishop Sankey and Toby Gerhardt in the first round because a cheat sheet told him to. You drafted Julius Thomas in the second round, who's currently on pace to break a touchdown receiving record, so that was a good pick. Cordero Patterson in the second round hasn't done a whole heck of a lot. But again, the Andy Luck, plucking him out of college and franchising him, there was nothing wrong with that. Mike Wallace, the draft pick, got a touchdown, 12 points there. And Mohamed Sanu, 120 yards and a receiving touchdown, 18 points. I'll say it, I was completely wrong on that one. Putting Sanu in did work out. And the thing is, it was going so well for Gary that even if he followed my advice and played Jeremy Hill, he would have had 9.5 points because Hill got in the end zone. I tell you, when you're on, you're on. And this team is on right now. I liked the Keenan Allen trade. I thought Gary got the better receiver in that deal and the pick. I was a little confused by the Sankey trade because I thought, hey, you take the guy fifth. He doesn't do much for the first 5 weeks of the season, but finally they're saying, hey, Green is out. He's going to get the majority of the work this week. Here's your chance to finally get something out of Bishop Sankey. Not only do you trade him for little Justin Forsett, who has flash in the pan potential right now, you give up 2 picks to do so, and you trade him to the team you're playing that week. I thought, what is this? This makes no sense. I would never do this. But again, it all works out for Gary. As for Scott, 13.4 points for Geno Smith. That might be one of the best games of his career. Enjoy it while it lasts. Marshawn Lynch, 6 points. Sankey, 6.8 points. Maybe it's not working out for him after all. Kendall Wright, 6 receiving yards, 0.6 points. The game log for Kendall Wright to date, 10.6, 3.1, 4.4, 4.5, 21, 0.6. Still a small sample size. Statistically, if we're going to do advanced stats, I'm going to call that 21-point game an outlier if he's done that once in 6 games. But here's the good news. With that 3-year contract, Scott's going to get at least 5 more good games over the next 3 years from Kendall Wright. So, hey, not all bad there. Marty B, 7 points. Gostkowski, 13 points. Steven Gostkowski has 32 points in the past 2 games. Nothing to shake a stick out there. And the Steelers' defense, 1 point. Sounds a little generous, but Hoyer only had 8 completions. Steelers only gave up 217 passing yards, even though they got trounced 31-10. Just an awful game all around. By the way, this is not really germane to Scott here, but it is defense and special teams. Congrats to Brad Wing, who's able to punt it out of his end zone 39 yards, or he's able to punt it 70 yards into the other end zone for a touchback. Great work there by him, really enjoying that. And of course, we have to say it, would Scott's record be the same without the Drew Brees trade? Technicalities since Brees was on a bye, but even if Scott had Phillip Rivers, he had no hope in this one. So the answer is a resounding yes. Both of these teams 3-3 on the season now, but I would not say that they are on equal footing. That kangaroo stole my ball. 102.9. The Whitechapel Rippers, 75.7. There's the Brian Williams that we all know and love. Mainly because there's the Cam that we all know and love. I don't know too many people who figured the game between the Panthers and the Bengals without A.J. Green was going to end 37-37. But Cam, 32 points, nearly 300 passing yards, threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for a touchdown, and ran for 107 yards on the ground. That's the Cam that you want to see week in and week out. What a game. Other than that, just steady quality throughout the lineup for Bry. Freddie Jackson got in the end zone, 10.3 points. That saved the day because he didn't have a ton of yards. Crabtree, great route last night, 10.9 points. He got in the end zone. Brandon Marshall, 11 points, all on yards, no touchdowns. Antonio Brown, 11 points, all on yards. Thank goodness his 5-catch for at least 50-yard streak is alive. That is the silver lining of a truly awful Steelers season. Niners defense got in the end zone late. 14 points for them. Al Morris only 5.5. That trade is not working out for Bry, but what does it matter right now? Let's focus on the positive. As for Whitechapel, not much positive to focus on here. They've dropped 3 in a row after a great start to the season. The one positive is between Roethlisberger and Stafford, Larry made the correct starting QB choice, putting Ben in the lineup. Ben got 10.3 points, blew away Matt Stafford, who only had 10.2 points. Brandon Oliver, great pickup 124 yards and a touchdown, 18.4 points. Gio Bernard, 21.7 points. Things are looking pretty good for Larry here on the first three, but then it falls off a bit. Julio only 6.9, Emmanuel Sanders only 3.8, Larry Donnell 0.6. Surprise, surprise, he did not have another 3 touchdowns. Potentially positive note for Larry on the bench, Shane Vereen, only 7 yards this week, but Stephen Ridley blew out his knee. He's done for the season. Vereen could see an uptick in the workload, but knowing the Patriots, probably not going to work out the way we all expect it to. Hagak, 111.9. Little Baby Jesus, 79.8. Couple things about Hagak here. One, at 4-2 and the most points in the league, they are clearly the number one team in the league right now. The league is all closely packed together like albacore tuna in olive oil. There's 2 teams that are 4-2. There's 2 teams that are 2-4. Then there's 8 teams that are 3-3. So nobody's breaking away quite yet, but Hagak is looking dominant week in and week out. Number 2, they've put a lot of their players on the trade block. Far be it from me to tell such an excellent team how to manage their affairs. I understand that Demarius is in the last year of his 3-year contract, and at $1.10, and one of the best receivers in the league, he's quite a bargain. I understand right now you're probably reluctant to cut or trade Arian Foster to franchise Demarius after Foster had that 26.1 point effort this week, although he is certainly going to get hurt again at some point and miss games, and you'll be sorry if it happens after week 9, aka roster freeze week. And I understand the purpose of this league sometimes seems to be less about winning this year and building up your draft picks for next year. But let me just say this. This is, as I mentioned, the best team in the league at this point, blowing other teams away. Demarius had 18 points this week, like 31 last week. You're not going to replace that in the lineup with Cecil Shorts or Mark Colston. Now, I understand with Phillip Rivers putting up 23 points and Foster putting up the 26, like I mentioned, that DeMarco Murray putting up 20, which was kind of a quiet game for him because the lead he has over Le'Veon Bell in rushing yards right now is something like the gap between Bell, the number 2 runner, and the number 15 runner in the league. I mean, DeMarco is dominating right now. Golden Tate only had 4 points, kind of disappointing being the number 1 receiver this week. Delaney Walker, I don't know why he was picked up or put in the lineup, but he only had 5.7 points this week. Kind of disappointing. Didn't even matter. My point is this. Run with this team through this year. If you don't have Demarius next year because you don't have the guts to franchise him and move Foster, that's fine. Live for the now. Stop looking ahead to get a first-round pick in exchange for Demarius. You need Demarius this year for your title run. You are in the driver's seat. That's just my opinion. That's what I would do. And you'll be extra sorry if DeMarco and Foster get hurt in the same week after you move Demarius out. By the way, my third point, since I'm always whinging about the luck factor and the scheduling factor, let me just point out that the excellent Hagak team, which is now 4-2 and dominating the league in the driver's seat with 111.9 points this week. If it just so happened that they played Lethbridge this week, Hagak loses by 1/10 of a point, and they fall to 3-3 with the rest of us. I'm just throwing that out there. As for Little Baby Jesus, great game from franchise player Aaron Rodgers, 24 points. Fake spike to the touchdown at the end to win the game. Nice job there. Wes Welker, 0.8. What happened? Why was he in the lineup? Julian Edelman, 10.1, and Deshaun Jackson, 18 points. Nice efforts from the 2 new guys. Gotta say, those were A-plus trades for Little Baby Jesus. Gronk, 9.4 points, but most importantly, 1 new injury. He went out. Let's see if he plays. On the bench, Antone Smith, 12.9 points. Another touchdown for Antone. Not sure if you're aware of this, but he has something like 6 touchdowns this year on something like 15 touches, and each of the touchdowns has been longer than 35 yards. He has something like the most amount of touchdowns for the most yards since like 1938. So look for Mike Sembrat to put him in the starting lineup next week and get a 0 out of him. Because that's how this fantasy life works. Ask Tanner, 81. It's Always Runny in Philadelphia, 70.9. It's Always Runny, still the number 1 seed in the league right now because of their 4-2 record with their 3-0 division record. But with only the 12th most points in the league so far, everybody's catching up to what I've said since week 1. This team is a fraud. That everyone includes Brian Barker, who's put his entire team on the trade block. Matt Ryan, at home, still lost, only 11 points, kind of disappointing. Shady finally broke out with 15.4 points. Nice to see him have a good game. But Frank Gore, 3.8 points. Vincent Jackson, 6.6 points. Brian Barker chasing last week's points on Jackson. Did not pay off. DeAndre Hopkins, 1.2 points. DeAndre Hopkins, all the talent in the world, going to be a special player. Just one problem right now, at the moment, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Eric Decker, 11.4 on the bench. Greg Olsen, 12.2 on the bench. Get those guys into the starting lineup over DeAndre Hopkins. And It's Always Runny wins this game, 82-81. But such is life. Now, let's talk about the Ask Tanner for a second. Yes, they are 3-3, like every other Albert. Yes, they won this week. Yes, Jay Cutler had 18.8 points, which are very good. Trade paying off. T.Y. Hilton had those amazing 28.3 points on Thursday night. That trade was paying off. Here is the problem. Andre Williams, only 5.8 points. Didn't really pay off there as the hot free agent pickup of the week. Percy Harvin, 0 points. In fact, since that big Thursday night opener in week 1 where Harvin was running wild on jet sweeps and put up 10 points, everybody thought, wow, he is going to be amazing this year. And he followed it up the next week with 10 points. Since then, 4.2 and 3.4. Yes, he did have 3 touchdowns called back in one game, but he probably doesn't score without those penalties, so don't count that. A little bit of a problem there. But here is the bigger problem. In this week alone, the Ask Tanner lost 4 guys. Victor Cruz, done for the season, and could be a career issue with his patellar tendon. That's a big problem for what I understand. Stephen Ridley, bad knee, out for the season. No Sean Moreno, just announced this morning, blown ACL, out for the season. Darren Sproles, tweaked knee, sprained, out maybe 1 to 3 weeks, but those things tend to linger. And on the bench, LeGarrette Blount, he's not going to do anything at all. So all of a sudden, Ask Tanner is desperate for warm bodies. Yeah, they got the win, but with 4 men going down in 1 week. Call that a Pyrrhic victory at best. If you don't know what it means, look it up, assuming you can figure out how to spell Pyrrhic, which, quite frankly, I don't like your chances. Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, 99.2. Riggins Riggs, 95.7. Both of these teams are 2-4. And every time I think I have something to complain about, Mike Barker has to show me up and end up with even more to complain about. For instance, he could complain about having the 3rd most points in the league, but being the number 12 seed right now, because there are only 2-4 teams, and he just lost the head-to-head matchup. He could complain about getting 5 points from Eli Manning against the Eagles' defense that turned Kirk Cousins and Austin Davis into 1-week superstars. He got 27.7 from Matt Forte, 16.7 from Jordy, 17 from Steve Smith, and still lost. Dez only 6.3, Antonio Gates only 8.7. The one thing he can't complain about is roster decisions, because he had all the correct guys in the lineup. He could complain about the Lions' defense having 19 points. I mean, Michael Floyd catches his first touchdown of the season, 10.7 points. Ronnie Hillman, not even that active this week, 11.6 points, all on yardage. And Tim refused to take my advice about playing Jordan Cameron, his franchise player, against a terrible Steelers defense. Cameron goes for 102 yards and 1 touchdown. Could have been 2 touchdowns. 16.2 points left on the bench. Tim stuck to his guns, played Benny Cunningham. Benny Cunningham's first touch of the game goes for a touchdown, and that puts Sigmund into the lead over Riggins-Riggs, a lead he would not give up. Anquan Bolden, 15 points on the bench. Didn't matter. Timmy even benched his 3-year contract kicker Greg Zuerlein, who with 5 points outscored Timmy's backup kicker Dan Carpenter, who had 2 points. And while I see the logic of playing Carpenter against New England as opposed to Zuerlein against the Niners, it still didn't matter. No, nothing mattered. None of it mattered. Timmy goes over 90 points for only the second time this year. And Riggins-Riggs, once again, has had the most points against, just like happens to them somehow every year. Oh, by the way, if that's not bad enough, franchise player and prolific point scorer Jimmy Graham is hurt and is going to be out for a few weeks. Well, there's always next year when Barker has at least 24 draft picks. So there you have it, folks. Week 6 in the books. Let's turn our eyes to Week 7, where we'll have the big shut-your-mouth grudge match between ISIS and Timmy Doesn't Have Any Friends.